SOAS. I'm here on behalf of Professor Iris Shia, the director of the PhD program, who unfortunately cannot be with us here today. We are very pleased to have Dr. Dalal, Albudaiwi, and Dr. Chunsheng, Huang, two of our graduates of the doctoral program here at SOAS. And this has been a banner year for the doctoral program. We've had, I believe, about 6 people graduating this calendar year. And I recall both Dalal and Chunsheng were part of our second cohort. And the time has gone by very quickly. See all of our students doing so well and graduating and succeeding in the doctoral program. Before I introduce our first speaker, I have an announcement that I need to make. This event will be recorded, streamed, and podcast. Video recordings will only capture the speaker and the students who will not be visible. Your voice, however, may be captured if you ask a question. If you do not wish your voice to be captured, please speak to me in advance so we can determine an alternative means for you to participate. Or feel free to write down a question and pass it to a staff member or to me, who can then read it for you.
Are you a lawyer?
No, I'm just doing what I'm told.
So then you are a lawyer.
We will have approximately 25 to 30 minutes for each speaker for their presentation, followed by maybe 5 to 7 minutes of questions. So without further delay, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who will be Dalal, who will talk to us about the research on impact culture and religion on the perception of freedom of expression.
Hi everyone, I am Dalal, they were from Kuwait, and welcome everyone. This is my first presentation in front of my parents. So I did some different presentation at home, but this is very. So the dissertation title is The Impact of Culture and Religion on the Perception of Freedom of Expression Between Older and Younger Generations in South Africa and the State of Kuwait. This is a comparative study. First of all, the reason of choosing Kuwait and South Africa. Now, I wanted to examine the impact of culture, which is social norms, and religion on perception of freedom of expression on two very different countries. For example, Kuwait is Islamic country. Kuwait is 100% Muslim country, while South Africa is a secular country with a number of different religions, including Islam. So this is the reason why I choose both. This is just one reason. The other reasons, both countries, since I'm talking about the right of freedom of expression, both countries, they have, in their constitution, they protect the right of freedom of expression, but of course differently with some different restrictions on the right of freedom of expression. The main purpose of the research was to look on the impact of the culture and religion on people perception. Also to look the difference between this impact on younger and older population or generations in Kuwait and South Africa. So in order to examine the impact, it was very necessary also to examine and investigate the legal system there and how legal system protect freedom of expression. And also there was importance to understand the awareness of the two nations' citizens about freedom of expression and how it's protected in their legal system. There were 3 main questions in the research. How do certain cultural values impact citizen perception, freedom of expression? How do religious values impact citizen perception of freedom of expression? And how does the younger and older generation perceive the legislation that protects and controls freedom of expression? My 3 hypotheses mainly about about how, like generally speaking, about how younger and older generation perceive freedom of expression. So my first assumption is that younger generation supports more freedom of expression in both countries, in Kuwait and South Africa, while older generation generally supports restriction of freedom of expression. The other hypothesis is that younger, in the age of the internet now, younger generation tend to call for more freedom of expression, and older favor more limitations. This is what I assumed in the beginning. Last one is the perception of freedom of expression by older, and the awareness of the freedom of expression by younger and older generation. Excuse me. My assumption is that the younger generation views their legal system in their country or legislation as too strict, whereas the older generation supports more restrictions on freedom of expression. The study used mixed methodology, so there was quantitative and qualitative. The qualitative part was gathering data through focus group and some documents such as regulations and constitutions. Quantitative part was the questionnaire. Also, the data analysis was for the qualitative thematic content analysis, which is the very traditional way of content analysis, and legal. There are some legal analysis. For quantitative, there was the SPSS. So it's mainly a cross-national comparative case study, and the selection of the two units based on the differences and similarities between the two countries. For the sample, there were 80 participants, 40 from each country. Age was 18 to 65 years old, from different organization institutions, including Kuwait University and University of Pretoria and other organizations. For the focus group, now the 80 participants, this is for the questionnaire. The number of focus group was 3 focus groups from each country, and then in each group there was 8 to 30 participants that were interviewed. Before going to the comparative analysis here, the main comparative analysis, for the 3 hypotheses, what I found is older and younger generation similarly support more freedom and support less restrictions on freedom of expression, while middle-aged group, 35 to 55, these are the group who ask for more restrictions on freedom of expression and regulations of freedom of expression. Now, definition of freedom of expression. This definition, what I mean by definition here, not the one in the Constitution. This is what I meant of definition when I met the people from South Africa and Kuwait and asked them about what is freedom of expression. You will find Kuwaiti people focus more about how to respect religion and how to respect the authority, while for South African participants, they focus on how respecting each other and how to respect the authority as well. Now, their answers, like both groups, their answers based on the history. Like in Kuwait, as I mentioned, Kuwait is religious country, Kuwait Islamic country, so they highly appreciate, they literally practice religion. For South Africa, they focus on respecting each other and the authority because they appreciate the values of the democratic society. So this is based on the 2 countries' history. The restrictions of freedom of expression, both countries' participants believe that there are a good amount of regulations on freedom of expression. They believe that these regulations that protect and control the freedom of expression, it's like a good amount of them, but they focus, and they are aware of the regulations, but they focus, or they believe that these regulations are unclear. And for South Africa, they mentioned that these regulations must be accessible for all citizens equally. So both groups, they believe that yes, there is good amount of regulations, control freedom of expressions. There is also a good amount of protection of freedom of expression in both constitutions, but what they really need and keep repeating most of the time is these regulations are unclear. For the freedom of expression in the two countries' constitution, both countries' constitution protects freedom of expression with different restrictions. The Kuwaiti constitution is very traditional, while the South African constitution there are a lot of details in South African constitutions about the right of freedom of expression. In my dissertation also, there were two cases, so I presented two court cases about about freedom of expression, and to see how differently the two judicial systems deal with the right of freedom of expression. So for the two cases, what I found is that the two judicial systems, dealt differently. For example, in South Africa, they focused more on the final court decision. They focused more on the articles of the constitution. For Kuwait, they focus more on the penal law. Penal law, these are the laws that explaining what is there in the constitution, because the constitution's articles are very brief. Both participants believe that there are inappropriate implication of the rules. This is what they believe. This is what they see. Because I wanted to understand their awareness of the legal system. So they think that this is inappropriate regulation. So they think that this is unclear, and then they think this is inappropriate application of the rules. I also found that the two countries' participants, they are not against regulations, but they just don't want too much regulations, and they believe that the regulations are very important to restrict and to protect, or to protect the national security and the morals of the society. When I ask, of course, it is very important to to be impossible to talk about a freedom of expression in separation of internet, because internet changed the notion of the freedom of expression. So when I asked Kuwaiti participants, they said yes, the internet increases their participation in the social sphere, in the political sphere. South African participants also, they say the same. And both, they believe that internet changed the boundaries and changed the notion of freedom of expression. Now, the most important here, when I ask them about their religion, when I ask them directly, do you think there's impact of religion on the perception of freedom of expression, both groups, they said no, there is no impact. For Kuwaiti participants, they deny that there is impact. One very important point I have to mention, that Kuwaiti participants, they have some confused about social norms and religion, because it seems that there is kind of overlap between social norms and religion. For South African participants, they were confident about religion, though, and they think religion is a more personal matter. But the reason I said they denied, because at the end, when I asked them how you practice freedom of expression, when I asked Kuwaiti participants and South African participants, they said we should practice a freedom of expression based on our, like for Kuwaiti people, they say based on our religious values. We shouldn't go beyond this. For South African, they said we should respect our religion and other religions. For the social impact, social norms impact was the same. When I asked them, do you think there is relation between the impact, they also said there is no impact. Participants believe that there is no impact of social norms, but when they define it at the end, they said we need to practice freedom of expression based on our social norms. Again, here when I said my assumption that older and younger generation will have difference, like older generation will call for less freedom, and younger will call for more freedom. But what I found is older and younger generation, they don't want more restrictions on freedom of expression. For middle-aged group, they ask for more limitations. Usually middle-aged group are experts in technology, experts in more experts in technology and internet, and they know, they are highly aware that the internet changes the boundaries of internet, of freedom of expression. The implications and the findings of, it was very important to understand people's perception of freedom of expression. It is very important for policymakers, in fact, to understand this. So, because policymakers, they cannot just have the policies in separation of people. This is very old to have the law or the policies or the regulations without understanding. But the new trend now that they have to understand, the people who will follow these restrictions, so that it will be easier to make new policies. Now for the two countries participants, both of them, they focused on the practical level of these policies. So again, they believe that yes, there are some policies for freedom of expression, but they think that there's a problem at the practical level. So it's very important now for policymakers to have this connection between the theoretical part of policies and the practical one. There is also a very important point that mentioned by Kuwaiti participants and South African participants about education system. They said that it is very important to have something about the right of freedom of expression and also technology in the education system. So that, and they also mentioned about having some or preparing some lectures for parents, because parents, protect and control their children. But for school people, they said that children, they need to understand from the beginning what are their rights and what are the limitations of freedom of expression to avoid any problem in future. Because the two court cases I mentioned in my dissertation, for example, in Kuwait. So in Kuwait, there is a guy who tweeted something against God and against prophets and against some other two countries, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. So if this guy would understand what are